Yeah. Okay, so just create a new class and name it controller. And name it controller right here. All right, so I'm getting some positive feedback that people were able to put it together just like I did it, and seems to be working okay. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Why? Just a quick question. I've noticed that we're not using we're not creating a new packages in this particular exercise. But would it be a better practice for, to do another package and put controller inside of that package instead of put it inside a homework too?
It's a good question. Let's talk about this at the end of this exercise. I would say that the packages are certainly helpful in organizing our application. Of course, the packages have,
In a professional setting, I would put it in a different
right.
package.
I would say that.
Okay, that's it. That's what I wanted
to answer your question quickly, I would say that the presentation tier probably belongs to its own package. There could be multiple packages that organize the data model, the business tier, and of course, likewise, database programming or any other persistent storage would also belong to a separate package. And you can see how Java library is organized. Everything is placed in a certain package, and not too many things are thrown directly at the highest level, like the Java language package. Instead, they're all like basically redistributed in certain packages. So, but for the simplicity of of our demo, I did not use packages. And I will tell you also that it's a bit too artificial to create these packages if you have only like a couple of classes. But when the list of classes is growing, and when you begin to experience more than 10 or 20 classes, then regardless to whether it's a model view controller issue or anything else, it's just time to begin to think, should I be using one big package or begin to split and reorganize everything in multiple packages? So it's just basically like somewhere down the road, realistically, the packages, you have to start using the packages, which again, I don't need this immediate need for it, because I have only a handful of classes in my application, and that's the main reason for me not to create packages right now. But obviously, like I said, yes, they should be in place sooner rather than later. Good question, thank you. Yeah. All right. So this is my controller. So how this controller should work? Let me just kind of brainstorm what this controller should do for me. Well, in the user application, let me bring this up right here in my design view, and now that I'm planning it. So this is my user interface. This is my graphical user interface. Obviously became quite visible. And this is the controller class that I'm planning to use. So I would say that the interface that we need for our application is pretty much just passing in the expression and say and basically provide us with the result. So this would be like if I move this to the next group right here, side by side. This is my controller class. To satisfy the needs of my graphical user interface, perhaps what I need, right? So this is our button that represents an action like this. I would say that because I need to construct this expression which depends on the inputs in these two boxes. This method should stay here as private inside the form. It's perfectly fine. But this part should be moved out. This whole, low-level access to the Lexer, its construction, the rules to run the start rule, and everything else. So let's put this inside a method inside the controller. Make it public. And the result is just a string. The result of this computation will be a string. And we can say evaluate expression. And since we're already constructing the string builder, we will require this to be passed as a method parameter. So we just say expression, pass this in, and have this method do the work with just exactly how this try and catch block does it right now. So I'll just basically cut it from here, right? Just basically cut. Just let me copy and paste. Sometimes I'm having trouble with my keyboard, which is ridiculous. But anyways, and then just delete this portion. Okay. So action performed. See how I moved this evaluate express like this try and catch block into to the to our controller, right? So now controller includes it. So again, there was involvement of the text result here. So right now, this text result set text, right? Text result set text will be simply doing this. Text result set text will say controller, which doesn't exist yet, but we'll say evaluate expression. And we'll pass this expression to evaluate the expression, and that's what we can do. So you see, instead of direct contact with Lexer, we delegate all the like business level application to the controller. So the controller should know how and like which objects should be involved in computing this. Controller decides. So there we go. We have this interaction between the controller and the business objects. Okay. So evaluate expression. And instead of setting results here, what we will do is we just basically return this, right? We will say return the string that here, and likewise here, return this string. So this modification should allow us to push the interaction with the Lexer to the controller level, and controller is perfectly fine. It's allowed to communicate with the business tier. Yes, question or comment? Go ahead. Yes, no, okay. So let's continue then. So now we need to establish the controller, and I think that the standard approach is that the window now needs the controller to be able to communicate, right? So now we have here we have our graphical user interface class, right? So I can make it visible right here, and this graphical user interface class will now communicate with controller, right? So now it has a reference to the controller, and if necessary, controller also may get the reference back to this window. So for this to work, I will go right back to the window and add the data attributes. These are my own data attributes, and one of them will be controller. Controller homework for controller. And I will make it so window constructor will take the controller as an input parameter. Just essentially modify constructor for window to take controller as the parameter, and say this controller equals controller. Okay, very good. So now this becomes possible to communicate to the controller from the window. The only thing is that we now need to construct the controller. So since this main window represents the entire use case and the only use case inside this application, it just makes sense to modify the main method to do the whole thing. So how about we construct the controller, right? We say now, besides just making window visible, what we will do is we construct the controller equals new controller, very simple. And once we have the controller, we can give it to to get the window constructed with the controller and make it visible. Realistically, this is not enough to complete this part. By the way, let's just like save this, the changes. So once again, we added the parameter to the constructor. We added data attributes that keeps the controller. We added evaluate expression to the controller class, and then we basically assembling the expression from pieces of text inside construct expression. Then we're in the controller to calculate the expression, pass this expression to the controller right here, right? So this expression is evaluated here. Could be an error. We just uniformly will display it in the result form, right? So now the window no longer talks directly to the set of business objects. It only talks to the controller, and the controller now has access to the lexer, right? So this is our lexer class, and now the controller creates it and talks to it, right? So the controller now communicates with the lexer. So we made this separation, and the lexer, of course, in its own term, like using other business tier classes to do the work over here, right? So everything seems to be done more or less okay in terms of organization of the classes so far. Now, but realistically, I think that the controller also has to have access to the window. And therefore, it would be very, very typical thing inside the controller to also, in its data attributes, right, to have a point the window, window homework for window. We want to be able to have this window available to the controller in case if controller needs to send some kind of message to the window. And I cannot use controller constructor to pass this reference to the window, because you see, in my situation, controller is constructed before the window. So we need to be able to So it's okay to construct the controller as new controller right here, then give it a window. But now I want the controller to have access to the window. So we can add, like we can go to the bottom of this class right here, and I will right click and I just say insert code, and which supposed to bring the user dialog box, which I don't see it on my screen, but here, okay. So it says, so I need a setter, right? A setter method for window, which gets generated right here. So we have set window, but I still need to modify this code. So first, we'll just split it to parts. Window equals new window controller, then window make it visible, and before we exit out of this code, we will call controller with set window and give it a window. This would be a pretty standard arrangement of, like, connections or references between the objects. A controller should be able to access window, and window should be able to access the controller. With this specific setup, everything seems to be in place. Everything should be operational, right? So everything should be operational and should be possible to do the work, right? So now let's just make a quick test of the latest changes, and a quick test, and just to make sure that we can compute everything. Right, so now, like, once again, 100 plus 200. Again, this is not the best user interface, but when I'm adding it, I'm getting my result. And if the syntax is incorrect somewhere here, right, if we add something that is not parsable as integer, click add, and it gives us this simulation of an error message in the result. But this time, this work interaction with the lexer is done at the controller level.